Good afternoon, everyone. Well, I'm happy to be here today. Unfortunately, Joni Scritchlow couldn't be here. She's the one who would typically be sharing this exciting information with you. But it's up to me today, and we're going to take a look at what Dr. Applegate was talking about in terms of some general higher ed trends in Illinois work. And we're going to look specifically at Illinois' early care and education workforce and the data we know on the trends and the qualifications about our workforce in Illinois. The data come primarily from the Gateways to Opportunity Registry, and nearly 100,000 people have joined our registry since it was launched in July of 2009. This was definitely helped because DCFS mandated participation in the registry if you work in a licensed center or licensed home, and that happened in September of 2012, so we saw a huge increase after that. And that also includes the majority of Head Start programs in Illinois because most of them are in licensed settings. We also have had a wonderful partnership with McVie with home visiting. Their McVie-funded home visitors are also in the Gateways registry, and we continue to work with the State Board of Education to figure out ways that we can increase the number of school-based early childhood professionals that are in the registry. So we currently have a population of about 77,000 active members in the registry where we can look at their data and learn from it. About 58,000 of those people work in group settings. So when we take a look at the basic demographics of our workforce, there are no real surprises, and most of these slides I'm focused on the licensed, center-based, and licensed home-based workforce. Across all of the roles that we've looked at, about 96 to 97% of our workforce is female. No big surprise. Licensed center administrators tend to be older than teachers, who tend to be older than the assistant teachers. In terms of the diversity, we find that licensed family child care providers tend to be the most diverse population, and our licensed center administrators tend to be the least diverse. One of the things that we can do with the registry data is we can take a regional look, and we can even get very specific down to zip code levels. So I had a good conversation with Stephanie the other day, and she was helping me understand more about higher ed and said that higher ed is still very much a regional concept. While there is online learning, it's still very regionally relevant. And so when we take a look at the race and ethnicity of our teaching staff in licensed centers by different regions of the state, we see that there are some pretty big differences. For example, the city of Chicago has the greatest racial diversity, with 41% of teaching staff being African American, 29% Hispanic Latino, and 21% Caucasian. Suburban Cook County also has a lot of diversity. About 40% of teachers are African American or Hispanic, Latino. And then Central and Southern Illinois have the least diversity. About 80% of teaching staff are white. Getting to some of Dr. Applegate's comments, if we look at our workforce, the early care and education workforce in Illinois, what percent have actually completed a college degree? And this is something that when we started to analyze the registry data a couple of years ago, I think it was a very pleasant surprise that our workforce is more highly educated than I think we've traditionally thought. For example, here on the slide, 83% of licensed center directors and nearly 3/4 of teachers have at least an associate's degree or higher. And keep in mind, again, I'm really talking just about teachers in licensed centers, so this does not include school-based, state-funded preschool teachers. If we break that down a little bit further and look at the actual levels of education that have been attained, again, we see kind of this logical pattern where directors have higher levels of education than teachers and so on. For our group of licensed center directors, more than 60% have a bachelor's degree or higher. And for our licensed center teachers, while we've been very pleased to see that 75% have at least an associate's degree, I think what's even more exciting is that at least 50% have a bachelor's degree or higher. One of the things that this slide doesn't show is this concept of the people that have some college but no degree. It's something we've spoken of before, and it's something we continue to monitor as a trend. In this slide, folks that are in the red or the gold categories, either the high school or the community college certificate, they might be where they have some college credit, but they have not completed a degree program. What we found in our data, and just in the recent data that we've been analyzing, the median number of credit hours that this group has completed, at least in our data set, is 62. And there's a huge range, even over 200 semester hours attained without a degree being completed. Even to the point where when we looked at data last year, it was 40-some% of our some college, no degree population had 60 semester hours or more. So I think that's a very relevant point, especially as we're talking about working with our adult learners, people who have these qualifications, who have been in the field, and thinking about how can we translate those into completers. One of the questions that came up when we started talking about the education data and the qualifications of our workforce, as well, is there any sort of regional basis for these higher qualifications than we think? So we took a look at the data. Regionally, we based it on kind of the top third of Illinois as northern Illinois. We looked at the city of Chicago, suburban Cook County, and then we looked at central and finally southern Illinois. And you can see by the chart here that while there are differences, and there are some significant differences, across the board, there aren't these major peaks and valleys in terms of educational attainments by region. It looks pretty consistent. One of the other things that we focus on with our workforce data is kind of this question about the age of our workforce and how that relates to educational attainments. The 2005 study by Hersenberg, Price, and Bradley, they examined this and looked at the relationship between age and educational attainment. And what they found was that the education levels of these workers was on the decline, and that the younger a teacher or administrator was, the less likely they were to have a bachelor's degree. And so when this report came out, one of the concerns they raised is, as our workforce, the highly educated workforce, begins to retire, are we going to be left with a workforce that has these lower qualifications? So just a quick visual examination of our registry data. It doesn't seem like this is an issue in Illinois. It doesn't seem like this is going to happen. We broke our workforce down by age cohorts, and you can see that our youngest population, the graph on the left is those having an associate's degree or higher. On the right, we're looking at bachelor's degree or higher. But our youngest group, those under 25, that's the group that tends to have the lowest educational qualifications, and not surprisingly, if they're still going through school and getting their degrees. But all of the other age cohorts, again, you see that there's a very similar distribution of those who have degrees. One of the trends that has been revealed in a few different studies, and probably most recently in the National Survey of Early Care and Education, is the fact that educational qualifications of center-based teachers who work exclusively with infants and toddlers are lower than those who work exclusively with preschool-age children. And this is something that we're seeing in our workforce in Illinois as well. So for center-based teachers who teach preschoolers, about 80% have at least an associate's degree or higher. But when we look at those who are teaching our youngest children, our infants and toddlers, it's just a little less than 70% that have their associate's degree or higher. One of the recommendations that's in the recently released Transforming the Workforce report that the Institute of Medicine released about a year and a half ago or 2 years is that all lead educators have a bachelor's degree with specific content and knowledge in early care and education. So in my previous slides where I was showing the education level of our workforce, that was just degree level. It didn't have anything to do with whether those degrees were in early childhood or in mathematics. So what we were able to do is take a look, and granted this is a smaller population, of all of our licensed teachers with bachelor's degrees. If we have their transcripts, we've been able to take a look and see how many early childhood credits do they have within those bachelor's degrees. And I will say this is just a very surface level scan. We're looking specifically for the course prefix to be early childhood or child development. We know there are a lot of courses out there that embed early childhood content, but we would have to be looking at things like descriptions to really tell. So keep in mind, this is a higher level scan. But what we see is a very broad range of early childhood content within these bachelor's degrees. Yes. Yes, yeah, great question. So 16%, the red part of the pie, 16% of these licensed center teachers with bachelor's degrees have between 1 and 6 credit hours in early childhood. You'll see that toward the other side of the pie, it's actually about 37% have 30 semester hours or more, which is kind of our equivalent of the ECE Level 5 credential. So the reason I wanted to share this is because of this IOM report, the Transforming the Workforce report, and I think it's important that the report does not go into specifics about how much early childhood content knowledge. That's for other groups to struggle with, and I know we've got a group in the state that's looking at things like that. But it's important to have data as a context to understand where our workforce is right now and what it might take to get them where we need to be. Probably no surprise to this room, and it certainly goes to what Dr. Applegate mentioned about high quality credentials and increase in wages, but we know that early childhood certainly has the societal value. We can look and see how wages vary with increased levels of education. And the different colored lines, if you can't read the legend, the red is for licensed center assistant teachers, gold is for center teachers, and green is for administrators. But not a surprise to this group, as education increases, so do wages. But you'll see that they don't increase a whole lot. And I think we would all like to see the upper end be a lot higher than it is now, and maybe we'll see that in 10 years. The last point I wanted to share with some registry data is we've been looking at our Accelerate Illinois Quality Recognition and Improvement System. And one of the questions we asked is that do programs that offer high quality care have administrators who have their Illinois Director credential? And what we're finding in the data is that 51%, so just over half of our licensed centers that are rated above the licensed circle of quality, so they've got their bronze, silver, or gold, they have an administrator with the Illinois Director credential. And you'll see the higher level of quality there is, the greater percentage have directors with the IDC. So our credentials and all of the work that you're doing to become entitled institutions and offer those pathways to these stackable credentials is definitely important and plays a large role in our quality recognition and improvement system as well. Joni asked me if I could also share some data with you, just an update on some of our Gateways credentials. As Dan mentioned in his opening remarks, we've awarded nearly 20,000 credentials. And this is just a chart to show you the amazing leaps that we've seen in the last couple of years. On the far left, you'll see that we awarded 953 credentials in basically the first 10 years that credentials were around. The Illinois Director Credential has been around the longest. The ECE and the infant toddler credentials came on around 2007, 2008. In the 2 fiscal years, FY10 and FY11, we awarded 815 more credentials. So in that 2-year period, we awarded just about the same amount of credentials as in the previous 10 years. And then that almost doubled the next 2 years. Then we get to FY14, and we're starting to see that just within a single fiscal year, we're awarding almost double the number of credentials in the previous. And FY15, I think we really hit our peak. Certainly having the credentials embedded within Accelerate Illinois was a major factor in seeing this increase. And as of yesterday, we've already awarded 5,500 credentials this year. And so I'm imagining that we're on track to at least meet or exceed that number of credentials awarded for this fiscal year. Everybody who's achieved a credential, for the most part, is taking college coursework to do that. So thank you to all of you for your work as entitled institutions and through your coursework and helping people attain their credentials. Just to give you another perspective here, this is the number of Gateways credential applications that we've received. And again, same sort of time period. The first 10 years, we received just over 1,000 applications, and last fiscal year, we received over 15,000 applications for a credential. We're at about 9,000 this year so far. So again, the demand for credentials is certainly taking off, and to let you know, Accelerate Illinois, they are definitely embedded, and coming up soon, the standards will require that directors have their Illinois Director credential, and a certain percentage of infant toddler teachers have an infant toddler credential. So we expect to see this continue to rise. You guys have really been challenging our marketing department in producing these maps, because the more entitled institutions we get, they have to fit everybody's names on. And so I apologize for the size on the slide, but I think you have these in your packets, current maps of entitled institutions. And what a difference a year makes. This is just entitled institutions for the ECE credential. Last year there were 58, and this year we have 64, so congratulations. I'm going back to that bottom data point. Over 80% of higher ed institutions in Illinois that have early childhood programs are entitled for the ECE credential. This is our map of infant toddler credential entitled institutions. Last year we had 36. This year we're up to 42. One interesting point is that of our early childhood workforce, specifically those working in licensed centers, because that's where we have the data, 45.1% of the teaching staff in those centers work with infants and toddlers. So there's a huge market out here working with infants and toddlers that need increased levels of education and need to get these credentials and continue on their pathways. And finally, our map of entitled institutions for the Illinois Director credential. Last year, 28. And this year, we are up to 34. Just so you know that we're coming up soon, effective July 1st of 2017, the Illinois Director credential will be embedded within DCFS licensing regulations as a way for a director to demonstrate qualification to be a center director. So congratulations to all of you who have gone through the process to become entitled institutions, who are renewing as you get to that point, it is making a huge difference for our workforce and keeping people on a path moving forward. Just a slide or two to leave you with, specific to entitled institutions. I wanted to share. This is a look at how many credentials we have been able to award because of completion of an entitled program. And so again, you'll see this sort of huge jump, especially in FY14, FY15. We know a lot of that is due to the work that Andy especially has done with the Jump Start program and really going out and providing that kind of one-on-one support to all of you and to your students to help kind of walk them through that process and get them started. So I wanted to thank you. I hope you found some of this information useful. We're really depending on you to think of some of those critical questions, what you want to know, and those of us that can collect the data, we have the ability to sometimes change our data systems to collect different information. So if there's something that really intrigues you and you'd like to know more or think about collecting in a different way, please share that either with me, Stephanie, Dan, and we can always look at ways to improve our data collection in the future so we can give you the information that you'd like to have. Thank you.